Welcome everyone to the first in our series of snippets on the preparation and development of the interpretive plan for Pease Park. My name is Chuck Smith and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Pease Park Conservancy.
And I'm Angela Davis. I'm the Director of Experience for Muse Work exhibits.
And I am Erin McClelland. I'm the Director of Operations for Muse Work.
And my name is Stephanie Lang. I am the founder of Reclaim, which is an organization that works to tell the lost, stolen, and hidden narratives of Black people throughout the diaspora and share these narratives through an artistic lens.
Pease Park Conservancy is working in partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department of the City of Austin to develop an interpretive master plan for the park. The first question I think we probably need to start with for our viewers is what is meant by interpretation in parks?
Yeah, that's a really common question. It's not a word that most people outside of our world are familiar with. Interpretation is a concept that was originally developed and championed by a man named Freeman Tilden, and it really focuses on the ways in which we try to tell your park's stories. And those are stories about your natural resources, like the creek and the geology and the plants and the animals, your history, and your archaeology or prehistory. Interpretation is really based on the idea that simply giving people facts and information is not the best way to communicate with them if you want them to retain the information or engage with it in a deeper way or even act on it in some way in the park. Instead, you really have to craft and shape your stories in ways that resonate with people and that help them see the connection to their own life experiences. When you can make that connection with them, it really helps people understand why they should care about the resources in your park and all the stories that your park holds. In a nutshell, interpretation is a framework for how you can tell your stories to people in a way that is going to make them more likely to care.
Are interpretive plans a common thing, and why is an interpretive plan an important thing for a park?
Interpretive plans are much more common at the national level. They're really an outgrowth of the National Park Service Initiative. So you really see them more commonly in national parks. Here in Texas, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the Texas Historical Commission, they both develop interpretive master plans for their state parks and state historic sites. But it's far less common to see them at sort of county and municipal parks. And that's primarily because of funding, right? They take money and time and effort to develop. That being said, when an organization can invest in one, it really does help to focus your efforts. Our plans really focus on the who, what, and how. So who are you telling your stories to? What stories are you telling them? And how are you telling them? And if you can follow the plan, that'll help you streamline your efforts, stay focused, and hopefully in the long run, help you allocate your resources more effectively.
Can you talk a little bit about what experience does MuseWork have in developing these plans and sort of the experience that y'all bring to the table for this project?
Yeah, we were really excited about this project because both Angela Davis and I, I grew up, she came to the Texas State Park System in their Interpretive Services Program, which is the program that develops and implements interpretive master plans for the state park system. We call ourselves at MuseWork an exhibition planning and design firm, but we really do everything from outdoor signage for parks to interior exhibits for museums to immersive, interactive, high-tech components. And so our familiarity with all those different media allows us to make recommendations in the interpretive master plan that are very strategic. We know that some media don't work well for telling certain stories. Other media work better. We really try to use our experience with various media and make careful connections between what is best going to support telling this story in what format. We really think that that's a strength we have. Of course, our other secret weapon is Angela. She won't say this, but I think she's an absolute master at thinking really critically and creatively about how you tell a story in a way that is engaging to the general public. No one else has Angela, so that's our own secret weapon.
Getting to speak with all the community members and all the people who have deep knowledge about the park and its resources. I had, in a process like this, I'm so fortunate to get to speak to botanists and hydrologists and geologists and also community members and just draw out from them some of the most intriguing and interesting stories that the park has to share. For me, at least, that process of discovery and getting to talk to people is a really important step, because as we engage in a dialogue about the park, those things that are going to help connect people in an emotional way, and also those story beats that are special, that make Pease Park unlike any other place. Those story beats tend to emerge organically out of that collaboration. After we've identified the main story beats, it is really important to look at what the best format for those messages might be. There are things that just can't fit on a sign. One of the things that I think we pride ourselves on is knowing that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for all storytelling in parks, and your specific stories are going to require their own specific set of methods, from tours to video series to yes, signs in the park.
What goes into creating an interpretive plan?
At MuseWork, we always start by evaluating what we call your assets, which is just a fancy jargony term for what you have to work with. In this case, again, it's those natural and cultural resources that you have in the park, all the stories that you have in the park, and then the existing audience that you already have. And then we build on those by working closely with you to shape your goals. We look at, given what you've got and what your goals are, what are the best strategies to help you connect with people? And that's going to include strategy for shaping your messaging, strategies for public programs, signage, built components in the environment. As for who's involved, we always start with an interpretive planner and a visitor experience specialist on our team. And then we flesh out our team based on what our clients' needs are. We consulted with scientists and with HARD and historians. We held a public input meeting. In the case of Pease Park, the Conservancy made it really clear to us very early on that you all were interested in addressing the history of enslavement on the Pease Park landscape. Some people aren't familiar with the fact that Governor Pease and his wife were slaveholders, and that there was a history of enslavement on this land. And then after emancipation, many of the people who've been enslaved there moved to Clarksville. So when we knew that that was a subject area that Pease Park Conservancy really wanted to address, we added to our team Stephanie Lang. Stephanie is a writer and curator based here in Austin with really deep connections to that Clarksville neighborhood. And she was really essential to helping us connect with descendants of those who lived in Clarksville and those who still are there, and really find out how those people would like to have their own stories and their ancestors' stories told.
Can you share a little bit about how Reclaim's work was integral to the development of the Pease Park Interpretive Plan?
One of the reasons is because of the work that I've done previously around Clarksville. I did a photo exhibition called Seen and Unseen, a Sunday afternoon in Clarksville, and kind of looking at the history of Clarksville, and especially a lot of the activism, kind of all centered around the 1928 master plan in Austin. And because my family has been in Austin and surrounding areas since the mid 1800s, and as well, my mother's paternal side is from Clarksville. So that, in my, background in engagement work, especially with the African American community in Austin, I was approached to bring kind of this piece, this perspective, this voice, looking at the historical aspect, and as well as like some of the more contemporary relationships and even kind of questions or challenges that the African American community has had or may have now with Pease Park, and also just kind of what they wanted to see and how they could engage with the park more.
What was the process like in terms of approaching the interpretive planning for Pease Park?
The first idea was kind of thinking about all of the different stakeholders in the African American community to approach in starting these conversations. And the first sense was to create, do these kind of larger group meetings. And what became very apparent to me was that a lot of people, it was important to do these more individual conversations. People had a lot of things to share, and it seemed like, people kind of sharing information. And I had a lot to kind of share as well about the history of the park. It just seemed like it worked better to do this more in a kind of individual thing, because everyone that I spoke to was really engaged and had a lot to say. And so I was able to kind of spend one-on-one time with up to, I would say, about 20, 25 community folk, from professors to community organizers to people that were, part of different religious communities in Austin, to people that were new transplants, to people who've been here forever, and the different varied in those that kind of had engaged with the park before and some hadn't. So it was really kind of like this mixture of demographics within the African American community and different ages as well.
Were the specific experiences of each person that was what influenced sort of the approach to getting the stories?
Absolutely. So what I did is, like, I had my set questions, and I kind of started with giving a little background about the park, primarily about Elijah Pease and the connection to Clarksville. A lot of people didn't necessarily know that, so I wanted to kind of give them that information. And even for the people that didn't know about Pease Park, just wanting to kind of give them this landscape of where it was situated, things like that. And so I did have those basics there, but then from that, I would spin off based on the questions and how they were answered. Many times they had questions for me, but again, everybody was very engaged. And one of the things that it was so important, and it's why I was wanted to be a part of this, was because, oftentimes our voices are not heard and questions aren't, asked around this. And so it was, so many people said to me, thank you so much for, wanting to engage with me around this. I'm glad that Pease Park is wanting to know what I think, and so that was a really important moment.
There was a group session, community outreach session that was held at Sweet Home. Was the process for that different than the individual ones? And I guess were even the goals and the outcomes different between those two types of outreach techniques or processes?
Right. The participants for the, I guess, for lack of a better word, focus group came, after these individual questions. And it was really, the questions that were asked were really informed by this individual, these one-on-one interviews that I had. So definitely. What came out of that, it was also kind of a little more kind of grounded in, we wanted, along with, Angela and Erin, went through each of the kind of different pieces of the park that were part of this interpretive plan, but then obviously with this focus on this kind of connection to the African American community. And specifically, one of the things that kept coming up in these individual interviews was, engaging in the history of, enslavement connection to the park. And one of the things that continue to come up is people wanting to acknowledge those who were enslaved and how to do that. And so that group was an opportunity to really engage with that and to also share with people about Clarksville and about Sweet Home. And many of the people there had never knew things that were being learned in the process for all of us. So it was a great experience.
So now that we know a little bit more about what interpretive planning is and what that process looks like, we'd like to leave our viewers with the three primary themes that have been identified for the Pease Park Master Plan.
The first theme is about discovering the wonders of nature, and it's also about thinking about our own place within that natural world and how the choices we make impact the park. Theme 2 is about slavery and segregation and issues of exclusion. It's important to address this history head on. By addressing this history, we're trying to create a public space that's welcoming and accessible to all. So theme 3 is at the heart of Pease Park Conservancy's work. We wanted to talk about the fact that Pease Park has been part of Austin's story for over 145 years, and taking care of Pease Park, that's part of our heritage as a city. Continuing to take care of it, that's our future.
Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the three themes that have been identified for the Pease Park Interpretive Master Plan. I'd like to invite our viewers to join us in our next segment, where we'll start to go a little deeper into each of these themes. But that's all for now, and thank you so much for watching.